Hi there. This is day 23 of the Azure Advent Calendar. Only one more day till Christmas. And you know what? I've got an overview of the latest and greatest updates in Azure. Well, not all of them, because if I want to talk about all of them, um, this would be quite a long episode. And I think this will be like a snack episode for you. So just goes with anything in between everything you'll have to do these coming days. So before I dive into the matter at hand, a small introduction of myself. My name is Bert Wolters, which seems to be a difficult name to spell out. I'm an independent technical consultant, and I've been working in the Azure space now for about 7 or 8 years already. I'm also a Microsoft Azure valuable professional in the Azure field. And next to that, I take pride in the fact that I'm still a Microsoft certified trainer, which means I can get to do Microsoft Azure trainings, but also still the good old Windows Server and other Microsoft certified trainer. If you want to look up my opinion on Azure, you can find it on Twitter at Bert Wolters, and you can find my blog at azureman.com. Now, just to get into the holiday season of things, I decided to dress Bert up just a little bit, and I've created a small agenda here. So for today, I thought it might be useful for people to know how to stay up to date. The cloud is really a rat race, and every so many weeks you'll see all kinds of new stuff popping up. That is exactly why people need these kinds of sessions to stay up to date. Well, I'll give you some of my magic tricks, if you will, to stay up to date yourselves. And it is not that hard to do so. Then I've got a whole lot of features you might have missed. I've categorized them. I've devoted a small segment to stuff currently in public preview. And we will close off by a Q&A where you can post the questions at the bottom of this video. So again, Azure might be experienced as being a rat race, just to keep ahead. And if I go to an average company with average administrators, and those administrators are very, very busy with the likes of Citrix and VMware or Ivanti or all those hardware vendors out there. And I come in with my one-stop Azure shop. Well, they are quite impressed with how many things there are in Azure. So really easy ways to stay ahead where you don't spend a lot of time following everyone on social media and deriving the latest and greatest features from there. I'd say look at the Microsoft events. And a few weeks back, Microsoft had this really small event in Florida called Microsoft Ignite. And around that event, Microsoft released their Book of News. And the Book of News, let me get that for you, is a PDF you can just download. And if you download the PDF, you will really easily be able to get latest information. Again, it's categorized, so Azure infrastructure, whole lot of love here, what's going on in that space, but also in the apps space, chapter 2, and so on and so forth. So if you're missing out on some of the things released around Ignite, this might just be your solution to a problem you didn't even know you had. So if there is a Microsoft event there, Microsoft will tell you publicly what's going on and where the new features will arise. Now, another thing and I really love showing this off to everyone, is the Azure Heatmap. The Azure Heatmap is a free tool. Anyone can use this. And it's created by a Microsoft employee. What this does, it contacts the Azure API and finds out whether or not new features have been launched. If you use your favorite search platform to search for Azure Heatmap, you're more than likely to end up here. And the brighter the color of the tile, the more recent the update of the service has been done. So for instance, this Kubernetes thingy is really shouting at me. Last update on December 12th. Oh, here we go. Azure Private Link support in AKS now in preview. Again, this is a preview feature. So this isn't in general availability just yet. So I wouldn't use this for any production environments just now. But hey, you should get acquainted with the new feature, see what it does, and if this is complementary to your business, you'll be ready to go once this hits GA, right? So if this site tells you it's in preview, it means it's in public preview, and basically anyone can join that preview to see if they can benefit from that software. All right, so far so good. We're into Azure Heatmap. Now, it was kind of a struggle to make Azure small enough to choose our topics to cover. You see Satya here, he has his hands wide open. We could cover a lot of topics. Mr. Gates here, hands closer together. I went with the Mr. Gates choice. Since I am in the Azure field, I do not cover the entire Azure platform of services. It is way too big to be covered by a single person. So I've put a scope into my talk, right? The first scope, which isn't even on this slide, is: am I advising customers about this? If I'm advising customers about this, I don't think I'm a subject matter expert, so it's not up to me to tell you whether or not this is a cool new feature or not. Then, how long back should I go? How far back? So the features covered today have been released between November and the day before yesterday. So that is basically today, which is Sunday. I cover new features in general availability, no private or public previews for the first section anyway. And if an existing VM family released into a new region might be very relevant to you, that is, for my qualification at this time, not per se a new feature. So it's out of scope. So I hope to have given you some insight into the how was this list created kind of information. Let's go. And first off, we'll start with Azure Compute. So a few updates of features on Azure Compute are, for instance, within AKS, the Azure Kubernetes services, where November 4th was a very big day. We received news that we could auto-scale an AKS cluster, where that we could put different sized virtual machines as AKS host in the node pools, and also started to use authenticated IPs, meaning much like we do that for instance, SQL databases as a service, and storage accounts, where we can limit the public IP addresses which have access to those services. Now, the same we can do for AKS as well. So we can limit who gets access to our node pools in AKS. I think that's a cool feature. It will make our life and working with AKS a little bit more secure. So if you are working in the AKS space and you see a benefit here, check this out. Again, these are 3 features currently in GA for AKS. Then in the VM space, we have to go further back. So on the 11th of December, we received word that proximity placement groups were GA. The 3rd of December, we heard something about dedicated hosts. And on November 4th, the Gen 2 virtual machines finally came to Azure. Let's go look at these one by one, right? So a proximity placement group means that we want to have our virtual machines as close as possible to each other. So this is the other side from an availability set, where in an availability set we are putting our VMs a little bit further apart to spread them across fault domains. With a proximity placement group, we can control that those virtual machines are in fact placed physically, a virtual machine placed physically, okay, as close as possible to each other. So if you've got this latency sensitive workload, the new capability is now generally availability, so check that out if you need this for your business. This is something cool in the cloud. Now, if you were going to go to Azure, I always presumed that you'd go for IaaS or PaaS services, but there are those who need a dedicated host running in an Azure data center. And this has come into the market in November already. So what we can do is provision a dedicated host with, on top of those dedicated hosts, which are solely provided to our customer, so nothing shared, we can address specific compliance requirements there. So we don't have any shared infrastructure for those certain virtual machines with other customers. But please be aware, before you start talking about this to your C-level management, please ensure that these dedicated hosts are already offered in your region. This service has been GA'd, is currently generally available, but it's not available in all Azure regions yet. So please check on the docs.microsoft.com website if this service is available in your region of choice. The Gen 2 VMs are generally available. They use the new UEFI boot architecture. We do not have the BIOS based architecture there anymore. Microsoft needed those to supply us with larger virtual machines, and for those customers who require operating system disks larger than 2 terabyte. These have been in Windows Server OS for some time now, and this will require you to still use VHD files for your virtual machines, because that is still the standard in Azure, and we cannot use VHDXs in Azure yet. So, but the Generation 2 virtual machines are a nice addition to the offerings there. So that's basically it for compute at the moment. Moving over to Azure networking. And Azure networking is a space that's getting more and more interesting by the month. If you look at some of the features they released, November 5th, Azure Private Link went GA. So Azure Private Link from now on will be the way to connect your PaaS services to your network. Available in all regions for SQL database, data warehouse, Azure storage, and of course your own private link services. This will be an interesting space moving forward. So if you want to connect your PaaS services to your virtual network to ensure that all traffic is routed across the virtual network in Azure instead of public endpoints, you should take a closer look at Azure Private Link. This one was quite interesting. Express routes for satellites. So together with Intelsat, SAS, and Viasat, Microsoft decided to expand ExpressRoute to utilize satellite connectivity. This, for instance, as an example, could be done for an oil rig somewhere in the middle of the Gulf and still be provided with an ExpressRoute connection to Microsoft Azure data centers. Please be very aware of the dual pricing that applies here. Part of the express route you pay for to Microsoft, and the other part you will of course need some kind of subscription or payment form with those satellite connectivity providers. If you are planning on deploying one of these solutions, get in touch with me. I'm so interested in seeing how this works and what the performance is, and yeah, so just shout out and let's get in contact. In the migration, business continuity, and disaster recovery space, we've seen that Microsoft is doing some good housekeeping. If you set up disaster recovery for Azure virtual machines, the VMs will replicate from one region to another. Now, if an outage occurs in the primary region, you fail over to region 2. And if primary region comes back, you fill them back. Right? So you're now basically where you started. The only thing is, in the past, you would end up with a whole lot of stuff being in the secondary region, like VHDs, like NICs, and so on and so forth. Now, with this new feature on November 5th, Site Recovery cleans that up. They clean up the disks in the secondary region, and VMs and NICs as well. So you'll, with a fill back, you'll end up with a clean secondary region. Good housekeeping. In the identity and security field, Microsoft has launched the Azure Security Center Quick Fix and the Azure Cloud Adoption Framework. The Quick Fix is really easy. For instance, if Microsoft detects that your website is accepting insecure connections, they will have a quick fix to really easily deploy HTTPS. Please use your head at all times when applying these quick fixes, because they're really fast, but they also adhere to the Microsoft baseline, and sometimes customers deviate from those baselines because they have a different opinion. Please ensure yourself that it wasn't a deliberate thing before applying these Azure Security Center quick fixes, because then you might just break stuff your customer or your colleague intentionally configured the way they are configured. Yeah? So just a small pro tip: if you do stuff in Azure Security Center, make sure that you do use your own set of brains. that was the overview I intended to do with you. These were the relevant features released between November and Sunday, December 22nd. If you have any questions, no problem. Just write them down below in the comments section and I'll pick them up. Or you can just contact me through Twitter at Bert Wolters or through LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/B Wolters. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful Christmas. Ho, ho, ho.